Hey, welcome back everybody. This is part 2 in my 3-part series on the Paper Mario series. Last time we looked at the original for the Nintendo 64, and next time we'll be looking at Super Paper... That's staying in the video, I don't care. And next time we'll be looking at Super Paper Mario for the Wii. Since this video is the second part in a series, I would recommend checking out that first video before this one, since I'll be making heavy references back to it and glossing over the basics of this game to get to the meat. At any rate, let's get this video started. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door was released in 2004 for the Nintendo GameCube and was a direct sequel to the original Paper Mario. Being such a huge fan of the original, I was interested in seeing what a second game could bring to the table, but unfortunately, I was never able to stumble onto a copy. However, I convinced my grandma to buy it off Amazon for me, and I got it and played it for the first time during the Christmas of 2014. My grandma really did help foster my love for one of my favorite little sub-series, and that's one of the many reasons I'll always be grateful for her. I remember really enjoying the game's writing, interesting worlds, and above all, the battle system. This is a sentiment that many players in the Paper Mario fanbase share. In fact, I don't think it'd be a stretch to say this is the favorite of the bunch for many players. There's a strong love for this game that trumps all the other entries across the board, it seems. But does it deserve that stature, or is it just on an Everest-sized pedestal? Well, today we're going to take the proverbial deep dive and find out. It's time for a Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door long-form review. The game starts on an equally chill and pleasant note, and in fact has an almost identical opening to the original. However, it's clear that this game's premise is a lot more ambitious than its predecessor. In fact, you can tell that as soon as those splash screens fade out. Paper Mario 64 had a little intro cutscene as well that was very cute, honestly one of the most charming things I've ever seen, but other than establishing the main collectibles, it wasn't really necessary for you to understand the overall plot. Here it is very necessary because it gives a mythological origin for Rogueport and gives you a tiny smidgen of a taste of the town's distinct flavor. And it shows how Princess Peach originally came into possession of the magical map that she gives you. The text scrolls way too fast for my liking, but that's besides the point. This opening is an effective prologue. Unfortunately, due to this game having a grander premise, there's a butt ton of exposition they have to cram in, which means there's quite a few scenes where you just stand around and talk for like upwards of 5 minutes. Even if the writing is just as great, if arguably not better than before thanks to a brilliant translation, that doesn't change the fact that most of these characters are tiringly long-winded here. There's enough funny lines to keep you invested, but even so, it's a lot of reading for the beginning of a Mario game. Thankfully, as an actual tutorial for the gameplay, this game doesn't waste your time, although I'd argue it's slightly less smooth for total newcomers. It introduces a lot of stuff pretty much at once, and if this was my first Paper Mario, I'd probably have a tough time getting into it. However, having played the original and TTYD multiple times, as well as back-to-back for these videos, I truly appreciate how you can just start playing and already do all the fun stuff. Even right from the first battle that's just meant to show how turns work in the most rudimentary way possible, you can have fun. Mario doesn't need to find a hammer, he already has one, allowing for immediate access to that attack option, and you don't need a lucky star to do action commands this time, you can just do them. It's pointless until you get your first special move, but you can even do the stylish commands during this battle, and you've just started playing. In addition, although there are several required battles, they don't take nearly as long as they would have before. You can even skip enormous amounts of tutorials. I skipped the ones that taught about basic action commands and badges because why would I do them? I know how to do that. I'm not 3.5. That made the boring stuff fly by, and the section still offered plenty to enjoy. Despite the long-winded dialogue, the prologue does a great job showcasing this game's more irreverent but surprisingly somber at times take on the Mario universe. It's a more mature tone that follows on from the first game nicely. Even just in the prologue, we have over-the-top moments that outdo anything that happened in the first game, seemingly without even trying. Squishing this lady's contact lens, becoming the victim of a hit and run, getting swarmed by a bajillion X-Nauts. I mean, way to abuse the poor GameCube's hardware. Goombella gets catcalled by some sewer Goombas, and you have to torture a giant blooper who is just minding their own business. Even the freaking tutorial segment manages to stand out compared to the boredom I had to endure for an hour last time. So even though there were moments where I felt like screaming, yeah, okay, I get it, this time the prologue isn't a burden. It does its job well. It could be improved, but it stays as out of the way as possible for people who don't need it, and I can definitely appreciate that. With the Thousand Year Door being a sequel, we need to mostly focus on how it stacks on top of the brilliant foundation of the first game. Like I said, the tutorial segment does that really well by providing the help newcomers need without keeping veterans on a leash. An immense improvement from last time, but what about other more quote-unquote core aspects of the game? Let's get the obvious out of the way. This game looks jaw-droppingly great, even by today's standards. The characters' sprites have all been updated to move more dynamically, and they all express themselves in a snappy manner. Of course, since the game is over 15 years old, there is some clear aging to be seen, as in if you zoom in like real close, you can see the pixely edges of all the characters, but I mean, who cares? All the designs look just as great as they did previously, but with an added level of polish thanks to the GameCube's power. And I can say the same for the environments too. They all have their own graphical flares to show off, and this paper world has never felt more actually made of paper. I mean, of course, they didn't go all in with the theme, so this is more of a stylistic render of what a world made of paper would be like for the people who live in it. A lot of little texturing choices make everything pop, and every little part of the world feels intentional and handcrafted. Especially those little bits where you go in the background, they especially look like they got glued to the back of a shoebox diorama or something. But they went even further with a multitude of paper transitions to tutorials, objects folding into existence, or the objects getting rolled up or getting torn to reveal the solution to a puzzle. Not to mention Mario himself has paper abilities where he gets folded and rolled up to perform different actions, which just looks so cool. I mean, this game's just so pleasant to look at. From all the fun characters on screen to the areas presented to you, this is still one of the best looking games on the GameCube to this day. And even now that we're well into Nintendo's HD era, it still stands among some of their better looking titles. The amount of personality you get from just looking at this game perfectly ties into the equal amount of personality you get from reading dialogue and experiencing the game's storylines. The character writing in this game is one of the things that people consistently point to explain why this game is the best thing ever designed, and frankly it's not hard to see why. This game's script is really clever. Characters, not just the main ones, NPCs too, are constantly spouting funny, silly, or even meta quotes, and it makes every new town or area exciting to visit. The original character designs don't hurt either. Since this game isn't in the Mushroom Kingdom, we see a lot more unfamiliar faces across the entire game. They all look great and help make this game achieve its off-kilter feeling even better. But even among the consistently great dialogue, some recurring characters really manage to stick out as my very favorites. Professor Frankly is a fun, nerdy character who's knowledgeable enough to give exposition, but still be a bit wonky. Lord Crump is the perfect idiot villain, a perfect embodiment of the classic Freak of the Week trope. Grotus is absolutely flat and imposing. Even if he isn't as original as the rest of the cast, he's a good, scary villain. Princess Peach keeps up her dainty toughness, and with the stakes being far higher this time, as we'll explore in a bit, her kindness and optimism make you feel really scared for her, even as she does everything she can to help Mario out, often at her own expense. Even your partners get better moments to shine. They were fun to meet in the original, and they did have some great moments. However, despite some exceptions, they kind of shut up after you initially meet them. In this game, they all pipe up a lot more, and it lets their more diverse personalities shine through. In fact, they all have unique dialogue for each time the partner speaks, meaning there are multiple dialogue trees for those scenes, adding some replayability. But out of everybody, I think Bowser and Vivian are the epitome of excellence in character writing. Bowser's whole deal is that he's an entitled man-child, and with his foil being the senile suck-up Kamikoopa, he's hands down the funniest and most absurd character in the game. Vivian is a lot tougher and more personal for me to talk about, but even though she's objectively less funny, she's my favorite character out of all of them. Constantly belittled by her older sister, Vivian is being punished for seemingly no reason when she's just trying her best. After being shown even the simplest kindness from Mario and having him stick up for her even when she initially ditches him for not wanting to help who she's been told is the enemy, she joins you as a permanent party member. Although it's a fairly cartoonish and basic portrayal of abuse, the truth is good people get stuck in horrible families all the time, and Vivian deciding to follow a path that encourages kindness and self-improvement over that is an important note to hit. I really love Vivian's little arc because I've had to be there for people who have to suffer at the hands of abusers, and it's nice to have something that could serve as an escape for those people, encourage them to make a change, and strive for a better environment. Plus, she's a witch and a total sweetie, so she was going to be my favorite no matter what. And all of this is without mentioning that in the Japanese version, she's explicitly a trans woman, which is why her sisters are discriminating against her. So I can also connect with her by being part of the LGBT community. Basically, everything about her is great, the highest of high highlights in a game full of brilliant characterization. The chapters in Paper Mario, the one for N64, do not hold a candle to how crazy the ones in this game get. They are totally creatively unhinged, not held back by any preconceptions of what Mario has to be. So for the love of Professor Frankly, skip this part if you haven't played this game and don't want to be spoiled. I promise all the surprises are worth it. Aesthetically, the first chapter in this game isn't anything super special at first glance. It's Petal Meadows, just another grassland area, something Mario's very familiar with. It is a nice change of pace compared to Rogueport and its sewers though, and roughly 30 seconds after arriving, you see a freaking dragon. There are plenty of fun little moments here like the quiz show, fighting the fuzzies, meeting Koops, and Hooktail Castle is such a fun dungeon, not to mention the boss with Hooktail herself, where she asks you to smell her feet, trying to trick you so you can't beat her. You're supposed to equip a badge that makes you sound like a cricket, which grosses her out, but I kinda sorta forgot to do that, so the fight was a lot trickier, but honestly, it was still a lot of fun. A great start for this game's meaty second act. Chapter 2 sees you entering the serene and beautiful Boggly Woods to help the Punies take back their home from the X-Nauts. This chapter has to juggle a self-contained story while also formally introducing a lot of the game's main bad guys, namely the Shadow Sirens and Lord Crump, who both do great jobs at trying to stop Mario in his tracks and sucking at it. Flurry is a really stupid character. I'm a big fan of thespian types, but something about her just kind of grosses me out. It's probably the fact that she assaults Mario without his consent. Gross. Stop it. Although their theme plays for a little bit too long, having 101 Punies follow you around is a fun bit of puzzle solving, and reminds me that I probably need to replay Pikmin again before 3 Deluxe comes out. I don't care what anybody says. Chapter 3 is sweet. This is where the writer said,
"Tell your disappointment to suck it. I'm doing a bottle episode."
You're limited to a few locations, and as such, they slowly let you explore more and more of those areas as the chapter's mystery deepens. Jolene is lovably and understandably cold and calculating, but like in a good way. Grubba is exactly the kind of skeevy southern businessman you'd expect to be running a wrestling theme park, and Rockhawk's fragile ego makes him a good red herring because you keep accidentally making him hate your guts more and more. Plus his boss fight where he blatantly cheats makes him feel really nice to take down. Granted, the mystery doesn't get really good until the major leagues, with the minor leagues stopping you every 2 seconds to talk to King K about literally nothing. He does set up some stuff, but I would have liked it to be a bit more spread out because I really just wanted to dive into the battle ring as fast as possible. I love how they handle battles in this chapter. Conceptually, it does start way too low on XP to feel satisfying, and a lot of the enemies are way too easy at first, but I like the idea of Grubba placing behavioral limitations on you. That makes the turn-to-turn strategy even more stressful to come up with. Add on a crazy final twist that comes out of left field but still makes sense, and a heartwarming ending, and you again have one of the best chapters in the series. Chapter 3s are 2 for 2 so far as my favorites, it seems, so hopefully I'll still love Super Paper Mario's Chapter 3 when I revisit that one. I remembered really hating Chapter 4 the last time I replayed this game, so I was really not looking forward to it. Luckily, I didn't have to do it for a long time because at the time of the last video's release, I was struck with a depressive episode and ended up moving and couldn't take my Wii with me to continue recording. I mean, it's nothing anybody needs to worry about. I'm still here, obviously, and I'm doing way better, but I was so worried about coming back later and hating this section. Surprisingly, I did not hate it. I didn't like the level design, that's for darn sure, which we'll get into later, but I liked the story of the chapter a lot, as many players will probably agree. Dupless is an absolutely ridiculous villain, and he made his mark the second he opened his mouth, so it's great he gets to stick around for the rest of the game. Having to be stopped by him every time you leave town is a bit much, but the idea of Mario having his name stolen and thus his likeness and friends stolen leads to not only an endearingly strange conflict, but also some great gameplay opportunities as you find yourself partnerless. This is the chapter where Vivian joins you, and as we established, I am in love with everything about her. And how can I review this chapter without mentioning the crows? The dialogue they spew is one of those moments where it feels like it shouldn't be in like any Nintendo game ever, but like I'm glad it's here because it's surprisingly very clever and enjoyable to read. It feels like when you listen in on your parents talking about super smart big people stuff when you're younger. Combined with Dupless hiding the letter P from the name select menu, this chapter has the best fourth wall breaks the entire game has to offer in my opinion. Despite some rather bland level design, it's still a fun set of events to see through. Although once again a jungle setting on an island, this chapter's plot has a lot going for it. The crew getting stranded by a gaggle of ghosts and slowly getting further and further inside the island, trying to still find the treasure they shipped out for is really fun and engaging all on its own. Unfortunately, it's about all this chapter does have going for it. The characters in this chapter, namely Bobbery and Flavio, and the back and forth heavy level design really hold it back from being enjoyable. I understand Flavio is meant to be arrogant and hateable. However, despite his interesting dialogue quirks, he doesn't ever truly get his comeuppance during the chapter, which makes him almost impossible to love to hate. He does show a more responsible side during the end of the chapter, which was sweet, but I felt like we needed that to happen a lot earlier in the chapter. I'm sure me saying Bobbery bogs down the chapter will get me some major league internet vitriol, but let me just say that I think the facets surrounding Bobbery's character are great. I love his backstory, and I love how fun his moveset is in battle, but I don't find him particularly interesting to just like talk to, and in a game with legendary characterization like this one, I think that is unfortunately the biggest insult I can give this guy. He needed more than just a British accent and some determination. I mean, maybe he could be the permanently pessimistic party member due to his past. The Pirate's Grotto is really fun to explore and has a fun overlapping path that makes backtracking with the boat a ton of fun. The surprise fight with Crump and the X-Nauts is a fun challenge, and Cortez is the one character I will stand by from this chapter. His ship and ghosts are kick butt, and he cracks me up. So overall, a good chapter, but very far from great. I really love the setting and characters in this chapter. The decked out train is a fun aesthetic, and all the people inhabiting it are unique and have completely different energies about them. Pennington is a character that I assumed I would hate because he's a megalomaniac like Flavio was, but people get ticked off at his behavior enough to make it silly. Plus, he shows multiple times that he's just a fucking stupid idiot, so I found myself laughing out loud at him constantly. The train station is a fine enough little dungeon, although I kinda wish there were 2 stations so the plot worked a bit better. As it stands, the Smorgs literally come out of nowhere. I mean, don't get me wrong, their boss fight is cool as heck, and the first time the game truly challenged me. I was on my last ropes for like a solid quarter of the fight, and if that doesn't tell you how formidable this hive mind is, I don't know what to tell you. I wish there was more build up to them though, and maybe a second stop could have helped with that, but I couldn't say for sure. What I can say for sure is that despite the mystery aspects being handled well, I kinda wish you could take on multiple mysteries at the same time instead of one after the other. Like, there's nothing about getting the autograph for little Mr. Bub that makes this have to be done during the evening. Same for the ghost, like just have the shades and lights always drawn in that room, and then tie the number of mysteries solved to what time of day it is. It would make it feel more natural, like you're always searching for answers instead of checking off the game's shopping list. Other than those complaints, this was a fun and solid chapter, and I would ride the XS Express in real life for what it's worth. Chapter 7 is the mixiest bag if you ask me. Pretty much every player I've talked with absolutely hates the General White Goose Chase, and I'm inclined to agree. I was having the worst time of my life with this one. Oh my god. Granted, it doesn't actually take very long, only about 30 minutes or so, but the amount of running back and forth to previous areas with nothing substantial going on except you walking isn't super engaging. Fun dialogue can't make something interesting all on its own, it seems. But it gets worse because you end up just going in a big fat circle back to Far Outpost where General White was taking a fat nap all along. So basically, you're forced to waste your time. Thank you, Nintendo. Launching to the moon itself is a super fun time, a good cutscene among good cutscenes, and then the X-Naut Fortress is a great way to cap off the last chapter in the main part of the game. Tons of little diversions like the crane game and the returning 8-bit Mario Easter egg from chapter 3 in the previous game. Lots of fun exploration and puzzle solving, and some tricky platforming to boot, even if that last bit starts to wear out its welcome the more you make mistakes. It's still fun, and the whole dungeon crawl coupled with a slew of battles make it a pretty great challenge. I only wish the boss was any challenge at all. The Smorgs boss being able to beat the crap out of me, coupled with the dungeon being stuffed with low XP granting foes, gave me the impression that this boss would also have it in for me. Unfortunately, not only is it just another Magnus von Grapple fight with like 1 or 2 new moves, it's also super easy to break in half. I used Koops, who isn't particularly strong at all, through the whole battle, and literally knocked it out in like 2 seconds. Shell Shield makes his audience blaster absolutely useless. Despite being a total drudge in its first half, Chapter 7 makes a hype comeback. It almost stumbles in its finale, but meeting with Tech and having him tell us Princess Peach's whereabouts ramps the tension back up for the finale. While we're on the subject of Peach and Tech and stuff, even between chapters, there's a ton of stuff to do. Previously, you could pretty much just walk to the area where the next chapter was and use a new ability to kick things off. Maybe a mini-boss or fetch quest would pop up later on to throw a wrinkle into things. But here, every chapter has a major roadblock beforehand, leading to even more interesting little bits that really flesh out Rogueport. Entering Chapter 1 has a mini-boss beforehand. Entering Chapters 3 and 6 has you becoming a tool of the actual Mafia in order to get tickets to some very elite experiences. Even if the lovey-dovey junk is a bit excessive, and that's putting it very, very lightly if you ask me, dealing with a bunch of wannabe New Yorkers will never not be funny to me. But I think entering Chapter 5 is what everyone thinks is the best one. You have to deliver a love letter to Admiral Bobbery and cure his broken heart, giving him the motivation to take to sea once more. This definitely does not belong in a Mario game, but it's still a welcome inclusion because of how sincere it is. That's the thing about Paper Mario, it does absolutely crazy things, but they stick to their guns, so all these out-of-the-blue concepts stick the landing. But the interludes go even further by not only including another round of Peach sections, but also Bowser sections. Bowser's place in the plot is that he has no place in the plot, so he desperately tries to do anything to find any info on Mario and the Crystal Stars. This is also reflected in the gameplay of his sections by tossing him into a parody of classic Super Mario Bros. Levels. Bowser is slow and heavy and isn't very fun to platform with, so thankfully this isn't the focus of the entire game. But as short little sections, they do add a bit of downtime to how wild the main game is. Peach's sections are like last time, except with more of an edge. See, she's being held captive by a bunch of masked kooks, so this is already a more dire kidnapping than usual. But things get even weirder when the main computer called Tech starts falling in love with her, so he asks favors of her, and in exchange, she gets to email Mario any info she learns. At first, it's convenient for her, but kinda creepy, since she has to ballroom dance with a hologram of herself and then sneak around the facility as an ex-Naut. Tech's inner conflict becomes more and more apparent as time goes on, though, as he's torn between wanting to look out for Peach and wanting to stay loyal to Grodus. But he starts finding clever ways to be there for her, like an unflashy quiz to tell Peach the true nature of the Thousand-Year Door, which, with the lack of background music and bland visuals, makes it one of the most artful scenes in either of these two games. He even ends up being forcefully shut down for choosing Peach over the will of Grodus. Even though it's a very what-the-heck concept, Peach's musings on why life is worth living and how emotions work really sell a sort of sweet and bizarre relationship between a princess and a robot. All of these interludes provide a ton of variety and help pace out each of the chapters very well, I find. Despite some weird concepts, a bit of blatant padding here and there, and some subpar gameplay, all of these do manage to contribute to the game in some way. I'm not sure I'd remove any of them, although I'd probably tweak a few things within them. Unfortunately, despite all of these positives, the level design leaves a lot to be desired, as I mentioned multiple times. Here's my main issue. Remember in the previous video when I said I was worried about the environments feeling metaphorically flat due to the samey camera angle? Well, Paper Mario 64 proved me wrong in that regard. It turns out I was actually worried about this game the whole time. Cutscenes are often presented in a variety of interesting ways, with lots of cool sweeping shots and camera pans, but a lot of the actual gameplay in the overworld is seen from a nauseatingly consistent angle. Pretty much every environment is always shown from a head-on perspective, and although there are exceptions like Rogueport, where you explore literally every inch of the town from every direction, most areas have a basic left-to-right structure. And that's really where my problems with the level design come into play, because this game makes you do a lot of backtracking. Chapter 1, you go all the way over there, get the stone keys, and then go all the way back to get to the castle. Chapter 2, you go all the way over here, talk with Flurry, go all the way back to get her necklace, and then go all the way over here and give it back to her, and then backtrack a bit more to get to the main dungeon. Chapter 4, do all of that again, except this time, you do it like 3 or 4 times. Well, good job, you made a video game, you guys. Chapters 5 and 6 have the same issue to differing degrees, but at a certain point you kinda get numb to it, I guess. But Chapter 7 takes the freaking paper mache flavored cake by making you go all over the world for a joke payoff that's literally the most unfunny thing I've ever seen. This is blatant padding, especially when everyone wants to go to the moon, but has to go on a pointless wild goose chase first. Like, oh my god, just launch me and make the moon the main chunk of the chapter, seriously. It's ironic then that the dungeons have a better sense of always moving forward. Hooktail Castle, the Great Boggly Tree, and again, Pirate's Grotto are all arguably the best parts of exploring this game, and the X-Naut Fortress is fun to break into as well. Playing Paper Mario 64 always felt like you were moving forward to the next silly moment, but I guess since they wanted this game to be bigger and grander, they had to put in tons of backtracking. I think this is what pretty much everyone can agree has aged the worst about Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. It makes the game feel bloated, and that's on top of some already unsavory side missions and interlude content. It makes this game a bit tiring to play, as when I got to a new chapter, I was initially enamored by the new plot and characters, but turned brain dead by the end due to all the backtracking. This unfortunately does weaken how great the story and characters are a bit. So then the real question is, how's the battle system? Does it make up for it? Paper Mario 64 has what I would already consider to be a not just fully functional but complete and elegant set of battle mechanics. It's for sure top notch at the very least. I'd go the extra mile and call it perfect, but that would ignore the fact that the Thousand-Year Door literally exists. This game takes the base laid down by the original and adds some smart things onto it, and if you watched my previous video, you know I rambled on for like 10 stinking minutes about all the basic battle mechanics, so since the basics are identical here, let's jump into the most obvious changes first. Probably one of the most apparent changes is the fact that your partner has their own HP this time. While it won't ever be as large as Mario's HP and can only be upgraded twice, it's still a great change since whoever you put in the front will be taking the bulk of the damage, allowing you to take that into account with your battle strategy. However, the developers smartly kept the FP pool tied to just Mario, so things wouldn't be too complicated. This keeps item usage simple as well, since you can use a recovery or other status effect items on either team member, but you never have to worry about getting confused on whose FP to recover. Speaking of items, enemies can use them now. I mean, it doesn't change things a whole lot, but sometimes that can get you in a pinch or even revive an enemy you've already taken out. So while not a game shaker or anything, it can adjust your initial strategy a bit, which makes it a good addition. Plus honestly, it just feels more logical that anybody could just buy and use any of these items besides just Mario. One of my minor gripes last time was the exclusion of action commands for your star powers. Luckily, they've been added here. A slightly longer little minigame plays out that adds some chance into what are otherwise more straightforward specials, and I love them all. From holding the stick back to recover HP, using a giant bomb to freeze your enemies in time, drawing around them to do damage, I mean, they're all just a ton of fun to act out. Although I do miss these MacGuffins having personalities, I would have loved to have these minigames being tied to some sort of character trait. But this is a mechanical improvement, and therefore a big step forward. On top of all of that, I feel they all take a reasonable amount of special power. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to recover anyway, because of the action commands. Well, partially anyway. This time, all the battles take place on an actual stage, so you have an audience that watches your every move. This is important as they charge up your star power for special attacks and give you less or even leave if you goof up on action commands. The bigger your audience and the better your timing is, the faster you'll recharge your star power. This is literally genius. It gives you a reason to always do the action commands and gives them a benefit outside of larger damage numbers. Not to mention, it's a fun aesthetic change as well. But they didn't stop there. No. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you stylish commands. Not directly pointed out by the game, stylish commands are done by tapping the A button at specific moments during an attack, allowing you to impress the audience even more and charge up even more star power faster. They're tricky, flashy, and they make you feel like a badass alone in your dorm on a Friday night. Oh gosh, I'm a moron. I didn't even talk about how great the action commands are here. Mario's jump feels a lot more natural to pull off, as does his hammer, and blocking feels even more responsive this time I found. Plus, there's a secret super block that allows you to totally counter any attack, but it has way tighter timing, which is a great move to take a gamble on if you're feeling smug. There's also the normal holding the stick back, holding or mashing a button, or performing a random button combo, but they're still just as fun and frantic as ever. In fact, I'd say they're even better due to the GameCube controller's brilliant button layout. The action commands will never not rock. I also really appreciate how they get slightly more complicated to adjust for badges, as well as the stylish commands which get really bonkers. The upgrades to the boots and hammer Hammer also get added as permanent powerful moves, and they have their own trickier action commands that are actually super tough to master, but I like that they're not just tied to a number going up this time. As far as the partners themselves go though, an interesting phenomenon is that the action commands are only as good as the partner they're tied to. Goombella is the first partner and has very simple action commands that mainly use the A button. She's thankfully more tolerable than Goombario by being a sassy blabbermouth and gives shade to like every enemy you use tattle on. Koops works like Cooper from last time, although his main attack has a more interesting action command, and his unlockable Shell Shield move saved my butt more times than I care to admit. The Yoshi, which you get to name once it hatches, and it also has a randomized color based on the time of day, does a bunch of tiny attacks, but I love his action commands because they use the shoulder buttons and he pretty much gets them exclusively. Bobbery is an absolute damage machine, dude. Fully upgrading him will give you a massive storehouse of power to take advantage of, as long as you have enough FP. There's even a secret partner in the form of Miss Mouse. I didn't bother getting her for this playthrough because I don't care about her use in battle or the overworld, so I don't have any footage of using her. Speaking of which, partner usage in the overworld is still kind of disappointing. All their uses are just as situational as ever, meaning puzzles are rarely super engaging or tricky, with the exception of Koops being able to stay in place and launch past Mario, or Yoshi being a good way of getting around quickly. I think I would have preferred to have the spin dash return, but the Yoshi being used to move around quickly is useful, especially during the painful latter half of the game. But I didn't mention the last two partners, Vivian and Flurry. Vivian is obviously kind of the best because she can light everybody on fire and cause continuous damage for the next few turns, which is sick. Still the best girl. Flurry, on the other hand, is very situational in battle, really only being absolutely necessary for enemies clinging to the ceiling, which aren't even in her chapter, by the way. But it turns out that Vivian can just do that too, plus give them burn damage, so yeah, Flurry sucks. I got uber irked by the concept of level caps even being a thing in the last game. Fortunately, they're not likely to bother you at all this time since you can build all the way up to level 99. With an uneven number, you won't perfectly reach these numbers, however you can get up to 200 HP and FP and 99 BP, which I think is a lot better, especially because you're not going to be getting anywhere near there on a casual playthrough. Like last time, you only level up Mario, so you find items to upgrade your partners in the overworld again. This time you'll be collecting shine sprites, and it takes 3 to upgrade each partner, although you will unlock the ability to ultra rank them as expected, so technically it'll take 6 in total, but having so many things to stay on the hunt for is just another way besides badges and star pieces to incentivize actually paying attention while exploring this wide world. So that's pretty much everything having to do with battles. Once again, easy to pick up, a little tough to get good at, and hard to truly master. Although the audience and stage randomly causing out of your hands detriments at random points for literally no reason than to suit an aesthetic change, even though it has absolutely no business interfering with what would otherwise be a standard battle system that just gets drawn out now, is, well, a bit annoying. This is overall an 85, maybe I'd give it an 86% improvement over the previous game. And that battle system was already like a total piece of art if you ask me. Building on that foundation and really going bananas with new additions and ideas makes this battle system the best in the retrospective so far. If I were to suggest improvements, I have 3 big ones. 1. Integrate Mario's paper curses into combat somehow, maybe put them in the strategies menu and allow them to do something. The most obvious thing I can think of would be to replace defend with the turning sideways move, so it would be functionally identical, but it ties the battle system and overworld together even more than before. 2. Make all the partners useful and not sucky, and give the special attacks something to do with a MacGuffin's character trait. Not terribly hard to take care of, or at least I wouldn't think so. 3. Let growing your audience be part of the overworld. A lot of species stop in to see how you're doing throughout the game that have various effects, and I think it would be fun if they only showed up after you talked with a certain NPC from that character design, like you're inviting them to your show. Those are just my suggestions for the last few tiny improvements I would possibly want. If anything, the next game's battle system could be totally identical and I wouldn't bat an eye. I guess we'll just have to see how the next game improves upon the fantastic and beloved turn-based combat that we can find in these first 2 games. This game's soundtrack freaking rocks. Professional cutie pie Yuka Sugiyoko returns alongside newbie Yoshito Hirano, later known as Yoshito Sekigawa, to make what I still think is the best soundtrack in the series, and yes, I finished Origami King, alright? I can sit through this entire 3.5 hour album and not skip a single track, which is not something I can say for the others, especially 64. It has a very MIDI-based feel in the best way. It goes absolutely bonkers without their sounds instead of trying to sound like a garage band orchestra, and I totally dig its electronic vibe. Although I will try to keep myself limited to a few songs, I'm not going to make any promises because I simp for this collection hardcore. Area themes are all extremely varied, which matches the variety of locations you find yourself in, whether it's a funky remix of World 1-1, an ambient, somber forest theme, or a more tribal sound, they all deliver flawlessly. Event and character themes are also great in variety and tell you everything you need to know about a scene or character from the very first beat. Let's start with some event themes. I personally find a lot of character themes underrated since they aren't used that often, but I really like the themes for Professor Frankly, Lord Crump, Grubba, and by extension Macho Grubba, Princess Peach, Flurry, surprisingly she did something right, and the Shadow Sirens. I think those are the best. And finally, last but of course certainly least likely to be least in an RPG, the many battle themes. The main battle theme is infectiously funky, being fun enough to make you enjoy the battles, but also having some tension to drive you to do your best. All the boss themes fit the characters well, and the funky instruments still make them enough for me to bob my head while I smack them on theirs. This musical style is something that feels Mario but also wholly its own. The music theory helps it fit in with the rest of the franchise, but its bombastic nature makes it emphasize this game's over-the-top style. The channel 8-Bit Music Theory actually made a really smart video on the subject, which you should check out after you finish this one. Don't go anywhere, please, I need the attention. The Thousand-Year Door has stood in front of you for the entire game, and after all this agonizing waiting, all this player and character-driven theorizing as to what could possibly be on the other side, this edge-of-your-seat feeling somewhere between anticipation and dread, it slowly cracks open. You have no idea what you'll find back there, but you know Princess Peach needs rescuing, and that's all that matters. Chapter 8 is a brilliantly done finale for a game like this. The whole world's aesthetic is totally creepy, and like the previous game, it keeps building tension higher and higher and higher by creating a level that feels like it never ends, but like in the best way possible. Unfortunately, it reuses a few set pieces and features some annoyingly under-leveled enemies for, as far as I'm concerned, no reason. You need to be leveling up as much as possible here at the end. It does feel like you're going through a gauntlet meant to keep something truly horrid trapped in the depths, but while playing it, it actually feels more like the devs were just implementing every single idea they could think to squeeze in before the ending. The room with the spikes, the room with the thin path, and the hallway leading to Gloomtail all scream undercooked or just padding to me, especially when you're heading back from that aforementioned boss fight. I really love the Tower of Riddles section with all its puzzles and a wicked dope centerpiece that ends up leading even deeper into this nightmarish world. And I love a lot of the new enemy types that add something to the combat and actually help you get as many level ups as you can here before the end, thank God. Despite some areas that could be cut to streamline the experience, for the most part this whole dungeon is worth every moment. It kind of compacts the experience of playing the whole game into one little section. The ending sequence of fights is literally one of the hypest things in video game history though. Meeting up with Grotus in person for the very first time and having him literally not give a single care who you are compared to him makes you quake in your boots as the battle with this sick sick puppy begins. He is a bit easy to deal with, but he has some tricks up his sleeve, being able to give himself a ton of buffs with his techno cane. They almost pulled the win in the fight, losing the cutscene trope after this, but thankfully they stopped themselves in their tracks by finally giving Bowser the intentionally shoehorned ending he really needed. He's even inexplicably tougher than Grotus if you ask me, which is kinda hilarious. But there's no time to dawdle because Grotus has taken off with Peach and gone even deeper into this freaking crypt. And this is where the plot totally goes off the rails. Peach gets possessed by a 1,000-year-old demon called the Shadow Queen, a being so evilly powerful that her literally being resurrected casts the world into immediate chaos. The game doesn't pull any punches or make any jokes about this. The Shadow Queen has possessed Peach's body as a vessel and actually kills Grotus. I mean, we do learn he later survived to be a joke villain in some Saturday morning cartoon, but in this very moment you learn total fear for this monster. The boss is structurally identical to the Bowser fight from 64 in that there's a first phase that gets interrupted by the final boss making themselves invincible. However, this time you have to survive several turns of powerful attacks, which really slaps you in the face with how powerless you are. In addition, the Shadow Queen fully heals herself by killing your entire audience. Scary stuff. Everything seems at its absolute lowest, but then you get encouragement from everyone you've met on your journey, and I do mean everyone. This scene can last anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes, so that's a lot of positive energy coming your way. The music just pile drives home the weight of this love flying towards you. We believe in you, Mario takes a central motif that's been playing throughout the game and brings it to its climax. And then the final boss truly begins. The music here brings the epicness of this fight up to an 11. It's telling you, you have to win. There is no other option. The Shadow Queen has a fight full of juggling multiple targets, powerful attacks, and very high HP. For reference, Bowser was the most powerful enemy in the original game alongside the Master, and they both had 99 HP. Although not as tough as Bonetail at 200 HP, the Shadow Queen has 150 HP, making her about as much as both the Grotus and Bowser fights you just fought combined. With the variety of her attacks, I ended up constantly swapping out partners to make use of multiple strategies. I found Vivian, Bobbery, and Goombella the best, although Koops came in clutch once or twice with a shell shield. Even Flurry got some use as a punching bag during the enemy phase. Again, despite me having more than enough powerful recovery items, the Shadow Queen keeps you on your toes and always thinking about your next move. And she's scary enough to make using Supernova feel like a last-ditch effort against her. With Peach all saved and stuff, and the world, I didn't forget about that, it's time for the longest ending in the universe. First, we say goodbye to everybody, which does feel surprisingly heartbreaking, especially with my favorites. I'm never gonna forget you, Obama fan and Vivian. After this, there's still more, as we get a nice, if a bit excessive, where are they now segment, and then we end on a sitcom joke, so pretty great. There is stuff to do after the credits, revisiting places for new dialogue, redoing the Glitz Pit, and the Pit of 100 Trials, which is a great test of strength. I wouldn't say returning to Rogueport ruins the ending, but I personally got enough out of the game, so I'd advise you to do all these side quests before the ending. And what an ending it is, huh? I mean, despite the uncharacteristically dark and legitimate horror it drops on you, it fits with the rest of the Paper Mario series, and this game specifically as being something that's by definition in the Mario universe, but it's taking a ton of liberties as well. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door is a really great game, as well as a really great sequel. It takes the art style, paper concepts, fun characters and situations, and battles, and makes them even more excellent than they were last time. But is it the 10 out of 10 masterpiece everybody says it is? No! I mean, I'd probably say it was like a 7 or 8 if I wasted my time pegging numbers on stuff. The amount of backtracking and pointless little moments in this game, and some considerably weaker level design and level presentation, make it just a tiny bit of a slog to get through at times, despite the excellent combat. Plus, the credits are a massive downgrade compared to last time. I mean, look at it, this sucks. Despite these setbacks, the game is by and large a great success, and a very fun time. The varied chapter scenarios and incredibly fun and deep combat are what keep many fans, myself included, coming back for more despite some less than stellar occurrences. Even with the amount of complaining I did throughout this video, which I hope wasn't too overbearing, I still really like this game a lot, but I think on the whole I love the first game a bit more due to its streamlined and better presented level design. So for a third entry, I think the team should try to build on the base of TTYD, adding in some tweaks to the battle system and having some more bananas level themes and characters, but they should also take a page out of 64's book, pun not intended but totally owned, and have level design that avoids backtracking as often as possible. I really loved that sensation of always feeling like I was pushing forward. However, on its own merits, it was still a blast revisiting this second game in one of my favorite series ever, and I will do so again. Just probably not right away. I think I need some recharge time. Join me in the third and final part of this retrospective series, where we'll be looking at Super Paper Mario and turning our Wii remote sideways, if you know what I mean.